Karen was sneaking into my back door, crowbar in hand, whispering orders to her buddy like she owned the place. She thought I was out of town, gone for the weekend. But what she didn't know? I was parked just down the street watching everything on a live camera feed, and inside my house were three of my old colleagues from the force, already waiting. I used to be a sheriff, and I knew she was coming. The second she stepped inside, the trap was set. Cameras caught every move, mics recorded every word. She crossed my hallway, headed straight for my office to try and plant fake evidence. Then came the voice. "Hands where we can see them." Karen froze. Her buddy dropped the bag, and before they could run, cops came out from every corner. She didn't know this was never just a house. It was a sting. She broke in thinking she was in control, but we were already there. And this time, Karen wasn't writing the rules. She was about to be arrested for breaking them. But now, let's rewind. Let's go back to how it all started. Before the handcuffs, before the hidden cameras, before Karen ever set foot inside my house. On the surface, Sycamore Hills was a model community, the kind they show in brochures: fresh asphalt, trimmed hedges, pastel houses with white shutters, and neighbors who wave without ever really meaning it. But I've seen enough in my years as a detective to know when something is too perfect. I bought the house at the end of Ashbury Lane 2 years ago. It was quiet, private, and backed onto a wooded stretch that reminded me of the places I used to fish with my father. I wasn't ready to say I was retired from law enforcement. I still had the instincts, the reflexes, the eyes that scanned every room the second I walked in, but I needed a break from what I'd seen: cartel raids, double crosses, officers bleeding in my arms. Sycamore Hills was supposed to be the calm after the storm. What I didn't count on was the HOA president, Karen Whitmore. From the second I moved in, she was there. Smiling, clipboard in hand, fake warmth radiating off her like heat from an old radiator. She introduced herself like a queen greeting a new subject, rattling off reminders about lawn care expectations, vehicle placement rules, and, I kid you not, a regulation about curtain colors facing the street. I nodded, smiled, didn't engage. Big mistake. The first warning came a week later, a printed letter taped to my garage. Garbage bins must be retrieved within 30 minutes of pickup. Mine had been out for 45. The next violation was non-compliant landscaping. I had trimmed my hedges in a way that she claimed disrupted uniformity. Then it was excessive barking from my German Shepherd Diesel, despite the fact that Diesel was practically silent unless someone approached the property. I started to realize Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was targeting me. And from what I gathered, I wasn't the first. Some neighbors warned me in whispers. They were afraid to go on record, afraid of the fines, the letters, the retaliation. Karen ran the HOA like a personal dictatorship. Those who kissed the ring were safe. Those who didn't, punished. She had friends on the board, friends in the city records office, and a little black book of violators she loved to parade around like a hit list. What Karen didn't know was that she'd chosen the wrong house this time. You see, I wasn't just any homeowner. I spent 15 years doing undercover work for a major city's organized crime division. I specialized in surveillance, interrogation, and, ironically, illegal entry operations. I knew how people thought when they wanted power. I knew how they pushed boundaries, tested reactions, escalated pressure until someone cracked. I didn't crack. I documented. From the second I realized what she was doing, I turned my house into a quiet fortress. I installed motion sensors around every window and door, all hidden inside decorative fixtures. I mounted 2 trail cams in the trees facing my front door and driveway, completely invisible at night. Inside, I had a rotating surveillance system that logged footage directly to a secure drive and sent live feeds to my backup server. Diesel was trained for protection, not aggression, and he had a silent alert command only I used. I didn't want to use any of it. I hoped it would all blow over. But then came the letter. This one wasn't taped. It was hand-delivered. In bold red font at the top, notice of emergency inspection. Karen claimed multiple reports of suspicious activity had been made about my property, that she, along with a security assistant, would be conducting an interior inspection of my home for the safety of the community. I stared at that letter for 10 minutes. She was planning to break in. It didn't matter that she had no legal right. It didn't matter that it was criminal trespassing. In her mind, she was untouchable, above the law. She thought no one would stop her because no one had yet. But I was done waiting. I picked up the phone and called my old friend, Detective Sofia Ramirez. Still active, still sharp, and still owed me a favor after I took a bullet that was meant for her during a drug bust 7 years ago. She didn't hesitate. "You want a sting?" "No, I want you inside the house, quietly, legally, waiting." She paused for half a second. "Done." Within 48 hours, I had my plan. I forwarded the fake inspection letter to the local PD with a report of attempted unlawful entry. Ramirez pulled some strings and secured a warrant for monitoring, under the grounds of targeted harassment and HOA overreach, a rare but valid legal path. I took the day off, made it look like I left for a long weekend, packed my car and drove off around noon. Inside the house, the stage was set. 3 officers hidden in my study and garage, cameras rolling, mics live, Diesel with Ramirez in the bedroom, every sensor armed, every exit covered. Karen had no idea. She thought she was walking into a power play. She was walking into a trap. March 26, 3:04 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had eyes on every angle of the house from my laptop, parked just 2 blocks away in a nondescript black SUV, my old surveillance van, the kind that blends into background noise. I didn't need to be inside to see what was coming. The cameras were already rolling, the microphones were hot, and Detective Sofia Ramirez was quietly posted inside my living room, sipping stale convenience store coffee and waiting. Karen didn't come through the front like a normal person. No, that would have meant being seen. This was her covert mission, her big moment of power. At 3:11 p.m., camera 4, the side alley cam hidden inside a fake utility box, caught the first sign of movement. Karen, wearing oversized sunglasses, white gloves, and a smug grin, crept alongside my house like a burglar in a bad soap opera. Behind her was Larry Bolton, HOA board member, ex-security guard, and full-time lapdog. He was carrying what looked like a gym bag and a slim metal pry bar. "We're clear," Karen whispered, looking over her shoulder. "He left this morning. Won't be back until Monday." She was confident, too confident. She didn't know my car was a decoy, that I hadn't gone anywhere, that my friend Ramirez, fully authorized, fully armed, was inside, watching them on a silent monitor. At 3:14, they reached the back door. Karen tried the handle. Locked. She turned to Larry with a flick of her wrist like she was ordering a butler. He stepped forward, jammed the pry bar into the frame, and with a loud crack, the lock gave. They entered my home at 3:16 p.m. I felt my pulse spike. This was it, the moment I'd prepared for. The moment the line between HOA abuse and actual crime would finally blur, on camera, under surveillance, and in front of the law. Inside, Ramirez stood completely still, just beyond the kitchen archway, listening. "Quick, take photos of the office. That's where he's got all the monitors and weird electronics," Karen said, stepping into my hallway like she owned the place. "We can argue he's illegally surveilling neighbors. That'll justify an emergency HOA vote." Larry opened the gym bag. Inside, latex gloves, a digital camera, and what looked like folders. Were they trying to plant evidence? Ramirez's voice crackled in my earpiece. "They're inside. Repeat. Suspects have breached the property. Audio and visual capture confirmed. Standing by." I responded calmly. "Execute the plan." At 3:18 p.m., Officer Jensen emerged from the coat closet near the stairs, badge drawn. "Step away from the hallway," he said with trained stillness. "Hands visible. Do it now." Karen's head whipped toward him. She froze, blinking like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Larry, for his part, dropped the bag instantly and raised both hands. "What is this? Who are you?" Karen snapped, trying to mask her panic with authority. "This is an official HOA inspection." "Ma'am." Ramirez stepped into view, now from the kitchen. Her voice was calm, her badge glowing under the light. "I'm Detective Ramirez, Metro PD. You are currently trespassing on private property, caught on active surveillance, and suspected of attempting to falsify evidence. You're done." Karen's eyes went wild. She turned, looked for a way out, tried to walk past Ramirez, and ran straight into Officer Boyle, who'd just come up from the basement stairwell. There was nowhere to run. "This is a setup!" she screeched. "You can't do this! I have rights! I am the HOA!" Ramirez pulled a folded document from her back pocket and read it aloud. A signed complaint, a temporary protective order, and a formal police investigation into HOA misconduct. "No, Karen," she said coldly. "You were the HOA. Now you're just a suspect." She went silent, for the first time, truly silent. No bluster, no arrogance. Just the twitch of someone realizing they had gone too far, and the fall was going to be hard. The cuffs clicked around her wrists at 3:22 p.m. Larry didn't resist. He looked ashamed. Karen looked betrayed, not by the law, but by her own confidence. They were escorted through the front door, right into a wall of neighbors. Phones were out, cameras recording. One woman even clapped. That's when I pulled into the driveway, slowly, methodically, like I'd just returned from a weekend retreat. I stepped out of the SUV and made sure she saw me. Our eyes locked. Her face twisted into something between disbelief and fury. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She had walked into my home thinking she had power, but it was never her house. It was mine. News travels fast in a gated community, especially when the HOA president is led out in handcuffs. By sundown, every resident in Sycamore Hills had seen the footage. It spread through Facebook groups, neighborhood chats, and local news apps like wildfire. The captions varied. HOA president arrested for trespassing. Caught red-handed. Karen's power trip ends in cuffs. Dictator down. But the most satisfying part? Not a single resident came to her defense. By the next morning, the HOA's emergency meeting was underway, a rare Sunday session held in the Sycamore Clubhouse. Normally, only a dozen people showed up. That day, nearly the entire neighborhood crammed inside. Folding chairs lined the walls. The tension was thick enough to slice with a butter knife. I walked in at exactly 9 a.m. Every head turned. Some nodded respectfully. Others stared, stunned that I had shown up at all. But I didn't cower. I took a seat right in front, placed a small folder on the table, and waited. The remaining board members, David Klein, Susan Burns, and Julie Tran, looked like they hadn't slept. Their expressions were pale, panicked, no clipboard, no confident posture, just confusion and fear that the storm hadn't passed yet. Let's bring this meeting to order," David began, voice cracking. "As you all know, there was an incident involving our former president, Karen Whitmore." "Former?" I asked aloud, loud enough for the room to hear. He swallowed. "Yes. Effective immediately, Karen has been removed from her position pending legal investigation. The HOA board condemns all unlawful actions and had no prior knowledge of her intent to enter Mr. Weston's property." I didn't believe that for a second. So I stood up. "I'd like to submit formal evidence," I said, holding up the folder. Inside is a printed transcript of the audio recording from the break-in, along with footage showing Karen's accomplice carrying a bag of what appears to be evidence-planting materials. Gasps echoed around the room. David didn't speak. Susan looked down at the table. But it was Julie, the treasurer, who broke the silence. "How long has this been going on?" she whispered. "How many other homes has she done this to?" And just like that, the dam cracked. One man stood up in the back. "She fined me $800 for unauthorized patio furniture that came with the house when I bought it." Another woman. "Karen told me I needed her approval to repaint my fence, then sent her brother to do it and charged me double." A third. "She accused my teenage son of vandalizing a stop sign and tried to have him banned from the clubhouse." The room erupted. For months, years, these people had been living under Karen's rule, afraid to speak, afraid of fines, retaliation, or public shaming in the HOA newsletter she loved to weaponize. But with her gone, handcuffed and under investigation, the fear began to fade. In its place, outrage, humiliation, and the beginnings of rebellion. David called for order, but no one listened. Julie stood and removed her HOA badge, placing it on the table. "I'm resigning," she said firmly. "I knew something was off, but I stayed quiet. That ends now." Susan followed. Then 2 more committee members. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply leaned forward and said, "If you want help cleaning this up, legally, ethically, I know how to do it, and I'm not afraid of HOA politics." Because in that moment it became clear This wasn't just about Karen. It was about a system that let people like her thrive, and I wasn't done. 2 days after the emergency meeting, I received a message on my private number, one I hadn't given out to anyone in the neighborhood. Blocked caller. Meet me behind the tennis courts tonight, after dark. Don't bring anyone. If this had been 5 years ago, I would have called it a setup. But something told me this wasn't a threat. It was a confession. I arrived at 9:42 p.m. The courts were empty, lights dimmed, the sound of cicadas filling the silence. A figure stepped out from behind the equipment shed. Thin frame, khakis, oversized hoodie. Julie Tran, the former treasurer who'd walked out of the HOA meeting in shame. She lit a cigarette with trembling hands and avoided eye contact. "I kept records," she said. "Karen never let anyone else see the financials, but she wasn't as smart as she thought. I made copies of everything. Every vendor invoice, every homeowner fine, every emergency repair." She handed me a thick manila envelope. Inside, dozens of spreadsheets, scans of checks, emails printed from what looked like a personal Gmail account labeled Ho Queen for Life. What I found made my blood run cold. Karen hadn't just been power-hungry. She'd been running a full-scale racket. Fines collected for non-existent violations were being funneled into an external HOA consulting fund. Except the account it led to wasn't HOA-related. It was a personal business. KW Property Services, LLC, registered under Karen's maiden name. A shell corporation. She was pocketing tens of thousands. I spent the entire night cross-referencing everything, and it got worse. $12,400, charged to a landscaping upgrade that never happened. $8,900, listed under security monitoring fees, routed to a private firm owned by Karen's cousin. $21,700, unaccounted for, tied to an HOA fundraiser no one remembered attending. All of it, buried in vague line items, shuffled between accounts, approved by board members too scared or too lazy to ask questions. Julie looked up, her voice barely audible. She threatened me, said if I ever spoke up, she'd have the board vote to line my house. I'm a single mom, I couldn't risk it. I nodded. You did the right thing coming forward. The next morning, I forwarded the full report to Detective Ramirez. She called me 45 minutes later. "You just opened a fraud case that goes way beyond trespassing. You realize that, right? I was hoping you'd say that." A week later, the local news ran the headline, "Former HOA President under criminal investigation for embezzlement and fraud. Community in shock." Karen's smug booking photo was splashed across the screen. The reporter highlighted how years of intimidation, shady fines, and rigged elections had helped her build an empire of lies, all under the guise of protecting neighborhood standards. Neighbors began organizing. Old board members were resigning. A petition was circulating to dissolve the HOA entirely. Others suggested reform, transparency, monthly audits, term limits. They even asked if I'd run for president. I declined. I didn't want power. I wanted justice. And the deeper we dug, the more we realized Karen wasn't working alone. If Karen was the face of the HOA, then the real power, the kind that stayed hidden, was the shadow board. That's what neighbors started calling it after word got out. A quiet group of insiders who rubber-stamped every shady decision Karen made, who voted unanimously without ever asking questions, who had their own properties mysteriously exempt from fines and their own accounts conveniently protected. They never appeared in newsletters, never posted on the HOA bulletin board, and rarely attended community events. But their signatures, their names were everywhere behind the scenes, tucked into digital minutes, backdated meeting approvals, and rushed spending authorizations. I started piecing it together with Julie's help, and with each name we uncovered, things got uglier. Michael Swinton, Karen's longtime advisor, who held no official role but managed community vendor outreach. Turns out most of the vendors he recommended had one thing in common: inflated pricing and questionable work. Darla Jenkins, a supposed volunteer accountant who handled event budgets, but had no certification and no paper trail for any of the spending. Brian Penn, head of HOA security, the one who authorized towing, surveillance, and enforcement, including multiple illegal home entries, all under the pretense of routine inspections. Each one of them had benefited heavily. Michael's home had a $20,000 renovation paid for by public safety upgrades. Darla's driveway was repaved at no charge to her, covered under shared maintenance. Brian? He lived in a rental that somehow received the same perks as full-time owners, and no one ever questioned it, until now. I submitted a full report to Ramirez. She was already a step ahead. "Funny thing," she said on the phone. "I pulled Karen's phone records. There were over 50 calls between her and Michael in the last 3 weeks before the break-in. Want to know what they talked about? Hit me. You. They thought you were running a surveillance operation on the HOA and wanted to take care of it before you made a move." I clenched my jaw. "So the break-in was a preemptive strike." "Exactly. They didn't think you'd fight back. Definitely didn't expect us to be waiting inside." That's when the threats started. Anonymous letters in mailboxes, one neighbor's tires slashed. Julie found her front window cracked, a brick lying in her flower bed. But we weren't afraid. We were already too far in. I called Ramirez again. "We need full subpoenas on every board member," I said, "and I think it's time to go public." She didn't hesitate. "Already got the paperwork, and the media's asking questions." Because this was no longer just about HOA corruption. This was racketeering, conspiracy, possibly even extortion. And if Karen was the queen, then the shadow board was the throne she sat on. It was time to tear the whole thing down. Detective Ramirez moved fast. Armed with Julie's documents, Mrs. Adair's testimony, and surveillance evidence from the break-in, she secured a full investigative order from the district attorney. Subpoenas went out to every member of the HOA board, current and former, including Michael Swinton, Darla Jenkins, and Brian Penn. By Thursday, it was on the news. HOA RICO case developing in Sycamore Hills, multiple members under criminal investigation. Yeah, RICO. They used a racketeering statute, the same thing they use against organized crime, to describe an HOA. Because that's what it had become. An organized crime ring hiding behind bylaws and fines. The first arrest was Brian. They got him at 7 a.m. on his way to the gym. Charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, aiding and abetting trespassing, and falsification of security records. Darla turned herself in the next day. She thought cooperating would lessen her sentence. Maybe it would. Michael tried to run. They found him holed up in a cabin 2 hours north, deleting files from a burner laptop. But it was too late. The paper trail was long. The timestamps were permanent. The witnesses had spoken. And then, as if karma couldn't help but show off one last time, Karen broke. In court, surrounded by cameras and flashing bulbs, she pled guilty, not just to trespassing, but to conspiracy, embezzlement, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice. "I was trying to protect the community," she said during sentencing. The judge laughed. "By turning it into your personal kingdom?" She got 4 years minimum, with restitution required to every homeowner she'd targeted. It wasn't enough, but it was justice. And it sent a message. Not just to Sycamore Hills, but to HOAs everywhere that operate in the shadows, thinking no one will fight back. That night, the neighborhood held a gathering, not an official HOA meeting, just people, free for once. No clipboard inspections, no passive-aggressive fines, no fear of speaking up. Julie came. So did Mrs. Adair. We shared drinks, stories, laughter. Kids played on the sidewalk again. Porch lights stayed on later than usual. A vote was held. The HOA would remain, but it would be rebuilt from scratch with real oversight. Public elections, term limits, and audits. Transparency would be the new law. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, drop a like, leave a comment, and tell me, what would you have done if Karen broke into your house? And don't forget to follow for more wild HOA drama.